Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Jessica Hayes, not Clement Orenser this morning, and I'm just going to be sharing some nature observations that were made mostly in the garden route, but also further afield across the country. Yeah, let me jump in. So basically where we started was, we all know that sort of by April 2020 we were all into quite a hard lockdown. And basically those figures are quite substantial. But what it meant was that we basically ended up with a global human confinement experiment on our hands. And there was a brief window of opportunity for us to have a look at how humans' presence and possibly their absence affects nature. So jumping on this bandwagon, myself and Carl were quite interested to sort of try and figure out what was going on locally. And that's sort of after we started seeing some interesting news across social media platforms. Wildlife were doing some strange things. We also know that this was some fake news doing the rounds as well. So from dolphins heading up a little further along the Bosphorus, and they were usually in Turkey, to some goats hanging out at the local fish and chip shop in Wales, some deer in Poland, wild boar in Israel, and we even had a sighting in Santiago of a puma in town. So we decided to just sort of have a look at what was going on in our own neck of the woods, and we saw things up in Kruger. The wildlife started making use of the Skakuza Golf Club in the absence of humans. There's some wildlife hanging around in Pretoria, and even the penguins down in Cape Town were starting to sort of head further afield than what they would normally. Down in the garden route, some of the cattle were hanging around in the main street in Knysna at night, which is not something they usually do. So just taking this into account, we thought, okay, we'll have a look at a snapshot survey. So these are the sort of questions that we just were curious to hear from people about. So we asked them to send us any unusual wildlife sightings that they may have had during this lockdown period. We also just wanted some general environmental observations too. So if there's anything of interest that they wanted to share with us, we'd like to have heard about it. And then just the last point there, which we were quite curious to explore, is what, and we heard it from Nelly as well, just the importance of backyard nature, or people that were lucky enough to be in lockdown and have access to open space or to gardens or to just sort of green space in their proximity. So we just wanted to know what sort of impact that had on their lockdown experience. So some of the information and some of the responses that we started getting back from people is that they certainly noticed an increase in bird life and bird activity in their immediate area. Obviously there was less noise. When people were doing their runs down to town to go and pick up their groceries, they were noticing that there was less litter in the streets. Obviously there were the wildlife sightings and the wildlife activity that started coming through, and we even had people noticing less air pollution. So then just very basically, three themes emerged from the survey that we sent out, was that there were both negative and positive influences on wildlife. Obviously the positives were that the wildlife started moving around more. People even noticed, those that were traveling, that there was less roadkill on main roads. Negative influences were possibly scavengers who were out in areas where hotels and restaurants are running, and with a decline in that, obviously there wasn't food available for them. And then very noticeably the soundscape, as I mentioned, changed. So people noticed that there was less noise, and obviously they were then aware of other noises, more natural noises. And then there again, the whole issue around gardens came through quite strongly. So people were using gardens, green spaces, open spaces for areas where they could exercise, and they certainly noticed that it was very beneficial to human health and well-being. And then just in conclusion, some takeaway or take-home messages from the survey that we sent out was that observations and experiences were similar to studies that were done on a much larger scale globally. So we had just short of 30 responses to this online survey, but it was very similar to what was going on elsewhere. And there again, the gardens popped up as focal areas, so people were birding in their own gardens, they were busy growing vegetables, they were taking photographs, and as I said, it became a place to escape, to a place to exercise, if you were lucky enough to have that opportunity. And then just very briefly and in conclusion, and I think again it's been said this morning, and it's been said during the course of this meeting, is that there was a very large emphasis on the benefits of protected areas. When people were excluded or couldn't go into those areas, they certainly noticed it during this time, and even just not being able to go out of your home and interact with nature was quite a big issue for most of us. So again, just the emphasis on green spaces and nature for our physical and well-being, and the importance of being able to connect with nature. That's it. Thanks very much.